The leader of the free world, it's your job to work around obstruction.
Okay, I'll give you that. Here, look, you're right. We've been saying this, at least on this show, we've been saying this. They need to repeal this Obamacare beast right now. I in agreement that this is not the right time to replace it because we don't have a good replacement for it. It needs to be repealed. Now, or forever be on record saying that you voted against repealing Obamacare. Now, you put up the full screen of those three senators. Let's talk about that very quickly. Shelley Capito, Susan Collins, and Lisa Murkowski. Two of the three of them voted to repeal it 18 months ago, and now all of a sudden they're saying they're not going to. I will tell you, they will get primaried. All three of those will be primaried. 2020 for Capito and Collins and Lisa Murkowski in 2024. They will get primaried if they vote against repealing Obamacare, and that's the bottom line is they'll probably lose their seats too.
Kat, though, the repeal without a replacement, is that just a political statement at that point?
Well, I think that it would be at this point because they know that they don't have the votes for it, but I still think that they should do it. I agree with Eric. I think that they said that they were going to repeal it, and they need to repeal it.
Also need to replace it, maybe, sometime down the future. We'll meet today's specialist now. She's a columnist for the Washington Times, a former White House spokeswoman for President George W. Bush, and a radio host with her husband, Matt, on Sirius XM's Patriot Station. And she specializes in cooking big Cuban meals. Mercedes Schlepp is here. And he was a speaker at the 2016 Republican National Convention. He's also a frequent guest on the Fox News channel, and he's the chairman of GOPAC, but he specializes in being a good listener. What a great quality, because that's how he gets all his info. David Avella is here with us again. So, Mercedes, I was kind of discussing with both Eric and Kat around, I get the notion of repealing Obamacare. I have been one of the staunchest critics of these sky-high premiums that hurt all Americans, but I was hopeful for a replacement. Where do you see the GOP going on that issue?
Well, I think there's a huge sense of frustration, obviously, coming out of Congress, not being able to bring both moderates and conservatives to the table to get the job done. This is why Republicans were voted in. There was a clear mandate of repealing and replacing Obamacare. Why? Because when you look at the fact that there is a destabilization in our individual insurance markets, that's troubling. When you have the fact that you're still seeing premiums continue to rise. I mean, a family of four next year will have to, it'll increase to 40% in terms of what their health care costs will be in many cases. I mean, Ebony, it is troubling. And the mere fact that the Republicans cannot come to that middle ground where you see this division amongst the moderates and the conservatives, I think that it's just a disservice for the American people. They're not fulfilling their promise.
Yeah, and David, I'm hearing from the president and also really from the GOP in its totality, a lot of criticisms around the Dems and them not getting on board and not being a part of this. And I think that's fair and that's accurate. But my goodness, first things first, right? Before you're asking for Dems to get on board, doesn't the GOP have to get on the same page with this?
At some point, Republicans and Democrats are going to have to go home to their constituents and explain when they said last year during an election that we're going to repeal and replace or reform, if you were a Democrat, Obamacare, what they thought that meant. And so much of this discussion and why it is a disservice to the American people is all about how many people the government's going to pay for in giving them Medicare. And it says nothing about the fact that there are doctors every day not accepting new Medicare patients. So what happens to those Medicare patients? They don't continue to get coverage. And we haven't talked about the things that really need to start happening in health care reform. We need innovation. We need consumer predictability and freedom for them to pick the plans they want. We need states, not the federal government, running the insurance markets. We don't allow states to sell insurance policies across state lines. So how about letting states actually dictate what their policies are going to be?
Why didn't they put that in, though, David? Right. Why didn't the Republicans put this in?
I'll tell you why. Because under budget reconciliation, you can't do that. That is new legislation.
But Mercy,
that would have to require.
Mercy, you and I are good friends. We know you can go ahead and
what I'm telling you, I'm telling you about the constraints of the legislative process.
They can go nuclear.
You really want to go nuclear.
Yes.
If the Democrats win the House and the Senate, you don't want to go nuclear. I think that is a bad move for the Senate to go
nuclear. Because we're going to end up with this. We're going to end up with maybe no repeal and no replace. And if they had just gone nuclear on this, this is what they could have done. They could have added the things like competition.
It would forever change historically how the Senate would be run.
Who cares?
I care.
But they're willing to do it on Supreme Court nominations, no, Mercedes.
No, this is not constitutional. There's nothing in the Constitution that prohibits going nuclear on this. They're turning the Senate body into a similar simple majority on this Look, elections have consequences.
No,
we put them there.
They do, and the Democrats would probably decide to go nuclear because they did in the past. Obviously,
they have in the past.
Senator Reid did.
There's precedent for it. I was going to say that's one of the things, David, when you're talking about going across state lines, everybody has talked about it. When given the opportunity, I'm very surprised and disappointed that the GOP didn't take that opportunity. I agree with Eric on this. I think the consequences would have been far less than what the rewards would have been had that been at place.
Here's next steps. Next steps ought to be starting to move forward on these things and putting pressure on the 8 Democrats who are up next year in states that President Obama easily won. So Joe Manchin, Joe Donnelly. Okay. Getting pressure on them, adding them to the 52 Republicans to get us to 60% on things that people can agree on.
Okay, but I agree with Ebony that although you can blame some of this on Democrats, I guess, fine. But look at the Republicans have control of the House and the Senate, and the president is a Republican. Could you imagine if any other entity in the entire universe ran the way that Congress is running? Imagine if you had a mechanic shop where they just tell you that your car's broken and you drop it off and they say, well, we don't know how to fix it, but it's definitely super broken and we know that. You go to pick it up, everyone's screaming about how to fix it. A doctor that just tells you you're sick but doesn't know how to make you better. I mean, could you imagine anybody else getting away with it? It's absolutely insane. They've had 7 years here.
Well, let me just give you a very simple way to get this done. Look, you get these 3 senators, or get one of the Democrat senators who are up, who ran again, who lost, who won, but Trump won in the states. No, West Virginia.
That's right.
West Virginia, Trump won by 40 points. Now you have a senator there that's going to run, and a Democrat who should come over. Here's all you have to do: repeal. Right? Repeal now. Get the repeal underway, and then go to these Democrat senators going, look, you're up for re-election in a state that Trump holds. You're going to lose your seat unless you vote along the lines of what the Republicans put forward as a replacement.
Which is where President Trump is at and where Mitch McConnell is, where I think they're saying it's less about time and more about the quality of the reform. So they're willing to say, let's move on repeal and then take the 2 years to have the hearings and to get to that point. However, the American people cannot wait any longer. We need significant changes now, Eric. I think that if they keep postponing it, and I mean, they've had 8 years to think through what has to get done. We need to have significant entitlement reform, especially in the area of Medicaid. We need to move it back to the states. And that's
repealing alone, Mercedes, without a replacement, I don't think satisfies what you're demanding, which I think is what the American people want and what they mandated in this election. Eric, let me go back to what you just said, though. You talk about ways to fix this in terms of votes. I think it would probably work. But what if instead of talking about the need to get more votes to get it passed, we actually improved the policy itself, and then the votes would take care of themselves?
Exactly what you're talking about. 4 things that conservatives complained about Obamacare: competition across state lines, drug pricing. Why is it you can produce a drug in America and it's cheaper to buy in Canada? Drug pricing, tort reform, and hospital pricing transparency. Those are 4 things we said Obamacare didn't have, but guess what? Neither did the GOP replacement bill. That's a problem. Now, Mercy, this is where I'm going to push back and say,
don't talk to McConnell.
Because the only way you're going to get those things in there is by using the nuclear option. And guess what? That becomes a bill that becomes good for the American people instead of a bill that for a vast majority of people who are using Obamacare, it's going to be a higher premium if it stayed the way they're trying to sell it to us.
Yeah, I mean, will Mitch McConnell move towards the nuclear option? It's unlikely, but in this sort of congressional cycle that we've seen, anything is possible, at least what we're seeing.
Can I just say what I see here is what Eric's talking about is a risk, and I understand that when you're talking politics of this stake and this magnitude, those risks feel nerve-wracking, but I think it's a risk that would pay off.
I do think that there is a lack of boldness coming from the Republican side in the sense that you had the 2015 repeal, 48 Republicans supporting the repeal, and now several
of the Republicans
it was
easy then. There were no
backing away
because they knew Obama would veto.
So it was a grandstand vote as opposed to now it's high risk. It's time to make that move by the Republicans. And I'm disappointed, quite frankly. I wish they can get to a point from a conservative and moderate side where they can agree. But the conservatives say it doesn't go far enough. The moderates say it goes too far.
Can we at least acknowledge that it's Paul Ryan and the House leadership?
They got it done. They got it done.
Got what done? They couldn't even pass
passed their bill. They took the risk.
They had to
it was ugly. It was horrible. They watered it down.
And Mitch McConnell and the Senate leadership side that they presented 2 bills that they just can't even get through. Don't forget, the Senate bill's got to go back to the House. Donald Trump is 100% right. They failed the American people.
Sorry,
Leadership
but
on both
not
sides
in the voters' mind. It will not be. It will be the Republicans who failed.
It's easy to blame congressional Republicans, but let me say this: we are a party that believes in the states running things. We ought to be for repeal as a governing philosophy. We ought to be repealing, basing our success on what laws we repeal, not what laws we pass. And under that scenario, we ought to be having state after state send legislation and waivers to Tom Price at HHS and allow him to do. Let him allow them to do waivers.
That's not what we're seeing, and that sounds great.
This didn't pass, and so now we have an opportunity to move in that direction.
Look, if we're going to debate this, it's not over yet. I mean, this can yes, there are 3 who say they're not going to, and John McCain may be on a train coming this way. Who knows? But they do. If they get 2 of these people to change their minds and sign on to this, it can still be repealed and do exactly what you said. Go to state by state and get waivers from Obamacare, from whatever infrastructure is left of Obamacare, and then guess what?
We can do that now.
Then you've got 2 years to fix it. No, you can't do it now. Because it's still Obamacare.
You could get states can get waivers.
Obamacare, though.
The HHS secretary has a lot of
Price
power.
has pushed through about 12 of these regulations, the things that we never saw those waivers come to fruition under President Obama. But yeah, Secretary Tom Price.
That's better. So
I don't know
Obamacare in place.
No, I think that is the wrong approach. I believe that action is needed now in terms of repealing or replacing Obamacare. It's clear it is not a perfect bill, but it does allow for entitlement reform. It does stabilize the insurance market, the individual insurance market, which is 2 of the areas that need to be fixed.
Everyone keeps talking about getting more GOP members of the GOP in Congress, more Republicans in Congress. I think about it, I don't even know what that means. I don't know what being a member of the GOP or being a Republican even means. When you look at a bill like this, you always think things like small government. That's not a small government bill. The House bill wasn't a small government bill.
We inherited a mess with Obamacare, and you have to decide whether you're going to put a Band-Aid on it.
Come on, Mercedes. I adore you dearly as well, but that language is not going to fly at this point, Mercedes. GOP controls the House, the Senate, and the White House. They had 7 years to get behind a conservative health care plan that brings down premiums, right? And that's not what we're seeing in either the House or the Senate bill. That's just very simple.
And if they inherited too big of a mess to do so, they should have said so instead of getting people to vote for them on something that they can't seem to do.
There's a process called amendments, and one of the amendments that could work is a Cruz-Lee amendment, which what would it do would allow for the insurance companies to come up with their plans that actually don't have to fit the Obamacare situation. But that gets tricky with individuals that have to deal with the pre-existing conditions. It also allows for health savings accounts in this amendment, which would be a conservative amendment to be used to lower the premiums.
Something that is already basically that ship has sailed.
Yeah, you're right. It's
so let's talk about something that hasn't sailed yet.
Should we plan the funeral service? I'm trying to decide.
I mean, the repeal is not over yet. There's still an opportunity for Murkowski, Capito, or Collins to come around and say, you know what, I voted for this thing in 15 because it's politically expedient for me to do it. Now when the chips are on the table, I have to get back to the table and do what I did before.
And better be ready.
Then you have 2 years to fix Obamacare without it being Obamacare.
And better be ready, though, Eric, to really roll up the sleeves and do real work on the fixing, because I got to tell you, it can look like a scapegoat, cop-out, easy way out to repeal with no real replacement.
Don't come up 2 years from now and go, oops, we didn't do anything.
Yeah, we've been twiddling our thumbs for 2 years like we did the last
standpoint.
7 years. Straight ahead, though, top Obama officials preparing to face congressional investigators over unmasking. And the number of officials under scrutiny might be growing. Stay with us.
Amid the hysteria around Donald Trump Jr.'s Russia controversy, the probe into unmasking by Obama administration officials around the 2016 election is very much heating up. Fox News is now confirming that Samantha Power, the former U.S. ambassador to the UN, has agreed to testify before the House Intel Committee at a date TBD, to be determined. Among other top Obama officials appearing behind closed doors on Capitol Hill this week over unmasking and the Russia probe, former National Security Advisor Susan Rice is now slated to speak with the Senate Intel Committee. I'm going to go to you, Ebony, because I'm trying to figure out why the delays, why they're finally agreeing, and why in the world are they doing this behind closed doors?
I'm going to start with that one, Eric. Many people wanting to see them, just like we've seen Comey and several others recently, out in front of the viewing public. But I think if the goal, Eric, is to get the most information and the most powerful and palpable information behind closed doors is the only chance. Honestly, if they were in front of the American people, you're not going to get anything, zilch, zada, nada from Power or Susan Rice.
And Kat, on March 22nd, Devin Nunes, who was running the House Intel Committee, said that Trump aides may have been inappropriately unmasked. Trump also said Susan Rice may have broken the law by unmasking, and that really is the issue here. It's the unmasking inappropriately of General Flynn that we're talking about.
For me, there are two issues here. One is potentially, yes, that it was inappropriate. I think that she acted in a politically motivated way. I think all you have to do is look at her past to know that. However, I also know, which is something that Ebony brings up all the time, that there's the